Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, I'm Brian Summers. I'm the president of the Utah Mining Association. And we're grateful that we have you all joining us. And just so you're aware, you should have gotten a little notice on this, but we are recording this Zoom meeting, and we'll be sending this out to our membership for those that weren't able to join in person. So please keep that in mind. We do want to also, we're going to have some opportunities for questions throughout the presentation today. So, please, if there's anything in particular you wanted to discuss or had questions about, then, please get those ready for the appropriate time. So to start today, I'm very excited that we have Representative Steve Lund, who's joining us. Representative Lund represents District 58 in the House of Representatives here in the state of Utah. Representative Lund is a great advocate for our industry and other heavy industries around the state. He previously served as a Sanpete County Commissioner and has had other opportunities to serve the public. Professionally, he's a petroleum engineer, which is something that for me is very exciting because we have lots of developers and lawyers in the legislature, but we don't always have as many engineers as I'd like. And I can tell you that when you're having a discussion about how much water we might get back from green hydrogen production, and Representative Lund, throws out that he doesn't agree with someone's analysis because it violates the third law of thermodynamics. That's not something you hear coming out of a legislator's mouth very often. So I'm very grateful that he's serving in the legislature and that we've been able to work with him very closely on a number of issues this session. So welcome, Representative Lund. Glad to have you here this morning.
I'm grateful to be here.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And so we wanted to have you talk a little bit today, Representative Lund, about a couple of bills that you worked on very closely during the session, and then also just get some of your anything that you want to share with our members about sort of larger macro issues that you dealt with during the session, and any impressions. So if you're okay, I'd like to start and have you talk a little bit about what we lovingly refer to as your Boulder bill. So would you mind starting off with that?
You bet. I'd be happy to. That bill was an interesting bill. It was just supposed to be kind of a one and done, slam dunk, get it in, get it out, and everybody would be happy. But it turns out that, and you warned me of this, Brian, that when you start working in the mining and extractive industries and trying to change some of the code, it might get really complicated really fast, and it did. In the state of Utah, we have some direction on sand, and we have direction on gravel, and we have direction on mining. But in between there are these big rocks that are now very popular for landscaping. And they're also big rocks that people would, in my part of the country, in an agricultural area, would like to get off their property so that they can at least put it into cultivation or pasture it. And so the whole thought is let's figure out a way that people can pull these boulders and sell them and maybe offset some of their expenses for clearing their ground. And it turns out that you can't do that. If you have sand or gravel on your property, you can sell it and still not fall under the purview of the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining. But if you go to boulders, that's been kind of a gray area, and we had to clear that up. It's interesting that in the code, gravel is from 4 millimeters to 75 millimeters. And then there's no definition for anything above that. So it seems a little bit strange that we would use a definition for boulders of anything greater than 75 millimeters, which is just less than 3 inches. Nevertheless, to keep it simple within the code, that's where we landed. And it seems like the aggregate industry is okay with that and happy with it. And whether Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining is happy with it, or just don't want to take a position on it in general. That's where we landed. But long story short, that bill now allows a person that happens to have a piece of property that they want to clear, it allows them to clear that piece of property and sell those boulders. Where in the past, if they wanted to clear that property and sell those boulders, they would have had to bond up for it and get a mining permit from the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining. So it just kind of clarified that and took that out of the gray area, I think.
Yeah. Well, and we appreciate you working with us on that bill. As you said, you didn't think that it was going to be something complicated, but it turned into be a little bit complicated. But we were able to have some great discussions between our industry and the aggregate folks and also Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining. And we appreciate you being willing to work with us to make sure we could get to something that accomplished what you were trying to do, and making sure that the farmer that was just trying to clear some boulders off his land didn't end up having an unexpected mining operation, but also making sure that we didn't create problems for our industry. So we appreciate that. And then the sort of crown jewel in my opinion of for the mining industry was the Senate Bill 250, and this was the mineral exploration tax credits, and this is a bill that was sponsored by Senator Hinkins, and you were the House sponsor. So if you want to talk a little bit, Representative Lund, about the benefits that will bring to our industry and the work you did on it.
That bill is a great bill and it's good policy. It really is. It is specifically designed for the hard rock mining industry rather than the coal mining industry. But the bill itself allows people, and it incentivizes people to go out and explore. If you happen to be a legitimate exploration mining engineer and you want to go out and explore, and if you happen to find a claim or have a discovery, this bill gives you the incentive to actually start developing that claim. And once you get into production and you're showing cash flow, you can actually go back and there's a tax incentive available to you for your exploration and your equipment that you purchase for that. It's for new mines. I'm a little bit unclear. I wished it would have been for other mining operations that we're going to expand, but specifically for new mines, I think it's good policy.
Yeah, well, and just to clarify, so it's for new exploration activity. So even if it's within an existing mining operation, if it's new exploration activity within that existing mining operation, that will still qualify. So
that's why I had it. That's why I understood it. Is if it was new exploration within an existing mine, then it would qualify. But I just wanted to be a little bit careful on the way I spoke.
No, thank you. And this is, like you said, this is going to be a really great bill for our industry. One of the challenges, and Representative Lund and Senator Hinkins and I talked about this during the session. We're frankly not seeing the level of exploration spending in Utah as some of our surrounding states are seeing. And frankly, part of the reason that some of our rankings in terms of our desirability as a place to invest in mining activities are going down is because of that, because we just simply aren't proving out some of our resources. And so, we have a very favorable reputation in terms of our public policy stance. I mean, we're a very mining friendly state, but again, we're just have not seen the same level of exploration investment over the last number of years as some of our surrounding states. And so we believe that this will really help with this. So again, you'll be able to, once you start producing and paying severance tax, you'll be able to get a tax credit for up to $20 million for each new mining operation or expansion of existing mining operations for qualified exploration expenses that you incurred during that phase of your operation. And it can be spread out over 15 years, and you can claim up to 30% of your severance tax in any given year against this tax credit. So, it's a significant financial incentive, but like all tax incentives in Utah, is post-performance. So if you go out and explore and don't end up producing anything, then all of that risk still stays on the exploration company or the producer. But if you do start producing and start bringing in new tax revenue from the severance tax, then you can have a portion of that credited back. So again, really appreciate all of your work on this, Representative Lund. It was a little touch and go our final night. So,
I am, and I just like to explain a little bit about that to your members. I'm a brand new legislator, and so I really needed Brian's guidance and the way Brian steered this. We're very lucky to have Brian as the head of the mining association. If it were up to me, I would have probably just said, you know what, let's hold this until the next session and get it done, because we've only got about 15 minutes left in the entire session. And Brian said, no, I think we can get this through. And so he worked on it and pushed hard. Thank goodness we have good leadership in the House and good leadership in the Senate. And thank goodness we have Abby Osborne, who is an incredible chief of staff. As a matter of fact, I don't think we realize it, but she's kind of a hidden jewel for mining operations. Abby went to Montana Tech and has an engineering degree. And so she very much understands and has a soft spot in her heart for mining and the extractive industries. But yeah, thank goodness, like I say, we have good leadership to help move this forward.
Well, and yeah, to your point, it the last night of the session, I mean, the last night's always a little bit crazy regardless, but this last night of this last session seemed to be a little extra crazy. And so, we had the bill and it was on the boards, and we were hoping to see it move, and just wasn't moving for most of the evening. But I'm really grateful, as Representative Lund mentioned, for leadership in the House and Senate, and also for his efforts, and Senator Hinkins that stuck with us till the bitter end. So it was passed at 11:58 on the final night of the session, and per the Utah Constitution, the legislature has to adjourn at midnight on the 45th day. So we had a whole 2 minutes to spare to get this thing passed, and it was the final bill that passed out of the House of Representatives. So we got there by the skin of our teeth, but again, a lot of amazing persistence from our supporters, and again, very grateful for all of your efforts, Senator or Representative Lund, so, and for Senator Hinkins and everybody that helped us with this.
Let me make just one more point, if I could. At about 11:57, I was still open for questions, and some of the other legislators come up to me that were the more seasoned members of the House, and they said, "You don't have to take any more questions. You're okay. Let's just get this passed." So we have, and they were. That was Representative Brammer and a number of other more seasoned representatives than me that were coming up saying, "This is a good bill. Let's get this done and let's help mining out." And you got to hand it to them. A lot of these guys don't get or understand mining, yet they have mining claims within their counties or within their districts. Their Trixie mine, for example, part of that's in Utah County, part of it's in Juab County, and I'm not sure that many of the Utah County representatives really understood how vital the Trixie mine has become again. Yeah. And this sort of bill, I think, will help revitalize some of those older mines that technology now could help us find the minerals in them.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And thank you very much for that. Representative Lund, we don't want to keep you for too long, but before you go, I wanted to also just ask you to highlight a couple of the larger, business and general issues that you were working on, and specifically, if you want to talk a little bit about the tax relief that the legislature passed, and then maybe also some of the education spending that you approved, and specifically as it relates to technical education and other things that could benefit our industry.
I'd be happy to. Just Brian, I'm sorry. This phone call I'm getting, I'm supposed to be interviewing some high school students in a mock interview, and so I need to run real quick. But if I could, I just want to say a couple things. As far as the industry is concerned, the biggest pressure any of us felt up there was on water, and how we can conserve water, or how we can find more water, or how we can clean water up and actually have it a new resource of water. And I think that's going to be a great challenge for the mining industry and for the oil and gas industry, is to figure out how to capture this water, how to clean it up, and how to put it into our culinary systems, but more importantly, into our agriculture systems and into our water cycle. As far as education is concerned, we spend an awful lot of time on education and an awful lot of money on education, but I think we need to focus more of those dollars into the natural resources component of education. A lot of it goes into high tech, and high tech's great, but without mining and oil and gas, you don't have high tech. And they need to understand that their base load or their foundation has to be the extractive industries. And we're sorely lacking on, I believe, on electrical engineers that have high voltage, high power experience and expertise, as well as mining engineers that have not only coal mining expertise, but hard rock mining expertise for the future.
Well, that's absolutely. And again, thank you so much for your efforts this session. Thank you for being such a strong advocate for our industry and for other natural resource heavy industries in the state. We'll let you get to your mock interview with the high school students. And again, appreciate all of your time and your efforts. And yeah, thank you on behalf of our industry. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. And for any of you, please use me as an advocate if you can. Happy to do that.
Okay. Thank you, Representative.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks to everyone. Bye.
Okay. So now we wanted to, first, I'd like to pause at this point and see if there's any questions based on anything that Representative Lund was talking about with SB 250, the tax credit bill, or anything else that he was discussing. Do we have any questions?
Hi, Brian. Mike Newman here. I have two questions. One is just general process. Do these bills now go to the governor for signing? Is that the next step?
Correct. Yeah. So the governor, under the Constitution, the governor actually has 20 days from the end of the session to either sign or veto or let go into law without his signature. So he has to review all of the bills that were put forward in the next in 20 days from the end of the session. So all of these bills that we're talking about are currently in front of the governor, and he and his staff go through and review them and decide whether he'll again sign, or he has three options. He can sign a bill, he can veto it, or he can let it go into law without his signature. So that's the process that we're in right now. And frankly, the two bills, the specific bills that Representative Lund talked about, what we call the boulder bill, that dealt with the definition of boulders, and again allowed landowners to sort of clear those kind of rocks without getting into the mining code, and then also our tax credit bill. We don't have any indication that there's any concern with those bills from the governor's side, so we expect that they'll be signed. But we'll obviously be watching that to make sure that nothing pops up on the executive front there.
Okay, good to know, and thank you for explaining the process. And secondly, it's my understanding that the tax credit bill for mineral exploration would also be applicable to mining operations that are in a standby or suspension status now, and if they resume with additional drilling, that would be qualified under this new bill for the tax credit. Is that?
That's correct. So there's some definitions in the bill that actually talk about, that talk about mines that are not currently producing, and mines that have even been closed or and whatnot. And so yeah, if there's new exploration activity, then that would qualify under the tax credit. And one thing too, this actually has retrospective application, which is a little bit unusual, but it actually goes to the beginning of this calendar year for 2022. So again, any exploration activities that are undertaken in 2022, that meet those qualifications would be eligible. But again, keep in mind that this is only once a mine starts producing and starts paying severance tax that you can claim that tax credit. So all incentives that we do in Utah are past or post performance. And so, again, the risk is still on the operators, on the exploration companies to put the capital into it. But then there's, obviously the opportunity to get some of that capital back once you start producing.
That's terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian, I have a question for you. My name is Charles Kosis. I'm the chair of the mining engineering department, University of Utah. And my question is, so I hear from Steve Lund about emphasis on natural resource components of education, and in particular, hard rock mining expertise. I just moved to the state of Utah, beautiful state of Utah, in July 2021 from Reno, Nevada. So I'm getting up to speed in respect to mining in Utah. But as a mining engineering department, I understand that we should probably put more emphasis on hard rock mining in order to develop this expertise, which probably wasn't that important in the past. So possibly we would have to work with the legislature and to look at our curriculum in order to put in probably other classes or courses which would emphasize hard rock mining. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, I think that, and I don't want to speak for Representative Lund, but one of the things that we've talked about in our conversations is that, we do spend a lot of money on education in the state. And I think that making sure that some of those dollars are directed towards programs that will, have benefit for our benefit towards continuing to develop our natural resources that we have here in the state. I mean, that's a very important thing. As anyone on this call knows, we've got a major worker shortage at all levels in the mining industry and in other industries here in the state. And so I think that, making sure that our education system is geared towards producing, graduates that can go and fill jobs. And I think in all sectors of the mining industry, we're blessed here in Utah that we do have a very diverse mineral estate. We have, again, hard rock assets and industrial minerals and coal, and frankly, all of them are struggling for workers at this point. And, both the technical, on the engineering front, and geologists and others, but also just, workers that can go and work in a mining operation. And so making sure that we also have that balance between, those that are going to go and get a 4-year degree versus those that, could benefit from a certificate program or a shorter associate's degree or something of that nature, is also important for us to make sure that some of those dollars are directed that way, just again, towards meeting, our workforce goals, and also towards, making sure that we have the type of investment here in the state that can help us further develop our mineral operations, because frankly, all of those funds, end up going back to benefit education, especially those operations that are, working on Sitla lands. I mean, those are royalties that go directly back into our school system. And so, I mean, it's a very virtuous circle, as you're producing mineral royalties, as you're producing, royalties with Sitla, as you're producing severance tax and income tax and property tax. I mean, these are all things that ultimately will continue to support our education system.
Thank you, Brian. I just want to emphasize the fact that we have anticipated the need for hard rock mining expertise in the state of Utah, and we are making steps already in order to emphasize this part of the mining industry as well. We also looked at industry-related certificates, and we have 7 new certificates in the department. So we are really making steps in order. What I wanted to highlight is that, we already started, emphasizing hard rock mining expertise at the mining engineering department, University of Utah.
Thank you very much, and yeah, I appreciate all the work that the U is doing and our other educational institutions. So I'm going to go on now. I do want to talk a little bit about some of the other bills that we worked on this session and that the legislature worked on, and just to give you a sense, and this is something I would normally do at the beginning, but since Representative Lund sort of had a hard stop, we wanted to get him in first. But there were actually 1,273 bill requests this year for this legislative session, and so a bill request is essentially the first step in an opening up, what will become a bill that's debated during the general session. So 1,273 bill requests. Of those, 814 were actually introduced in the House or the Senate during the 45-day legislative session. And of those 814, 513 were ultimately passed. And so Utah actually has one of the shortest legislative sessions in the country. And so, passing 513 bills in a 45-day session is quite an accomplishment. And so it sort of shows you the pace and the level of activity that we as advocates for our industry have to keep up with. I should say that we've got a great legislative committee for the Mining Association, and we work very closely with the Manufacturers Association and the Petroleum Association and our legislative committee, and help to support one another as well as other industry groups and business groups. So I just wanted to go through and talk about a few of the bills that we were working on, and by no means am I going to get to all of the bills that were on our tracker. We had a 9-page legislative tracker during the session with all the bills that we were officially either had a position on or were monitoring during the session. And I just want to focus on a few of them, and again give some time for folks to ask questions. So the first one that I want to talk about is House Bill 35, and this is called Economic Development Modifications. And what this bill did is to actually change some of the tax incentive programs that we have here in the state that deal with trying to further develop and diversify Utah's economy. And the thing that was of particular interest for the mining industry in this bill is that this actually, last session, we had a bill that was sponsored by Representative Carl Albrecht, who's another great advocate for our industry, that actually opened up sort of the premier tax incentive program in the state, which is called EdTIF. It's an Economic Development Tax Increment Financing Program, and opened it up to mining and agricultural operations for the first time, and also made it easier to claim those tax credits in the rural parts of our state. And what this bill, HB 35, this session did was to actually change that a little bit so that the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity has the opportunity to focus more on targeted industries in the urban parts of our state. And so for the target industries that they have, which, sort of deal with information technology companies and advanced manufacturing and things of that nature, they'll be able to target those on a much more precise basis. But for the rural parts of our state, the mining and agricultural operations and other economic development opportunities will still be eligible for these. And one of the things that we had to do was to actually change some of the language in the bill so that if there are mining operations in the sort of shoulder areas of the urban parts of our state, that they would still be able to be eligible for these EdTIF programs. One of the things Representative Lund talked about, the activity that's going on in the Tintic mining district right now, and most of that Tintic district is actually in Utah County, which is a county of the second class. It's an urban county, but because a lot of these urban counties have areas, the sort of shoulder areas that are still rural and still have a lot of these, mineral development opportunities, we changed the language so that we could make sure that those type of operations were still eligible. I'm going to get this out of the way now. So, and if we would need to talk about it later, we can. But one thing, and I'm just sort of going through these bills on in a numerical order, but House Bill 60 was a very controversial bill during the legislative session. This was the vaccine passport amendments. And I just wanted to clarify, ultimately, this bill didn't pass. It was held up in the Senate on the last night, but we did have some questions about the Mining Association's position on this. We took a high-profile opposed position on this, and the reason that we did is that it's not because we support vaccine mandates. We were very much opposed to the federal vaccine mandates that were being discussed through OSHA. We oppose all employer mandates for when it comes to especially issues like this with health and safety and other things that could potentially put a constraint on the way that an individual business decides to run their operation and decides to do what's best for their employees. So again, it's not that our high profile opposed bill for these vaccine passports, which essentially would have, in essence, prohibited employers from asking about vaccination status for their employees. It's not that we supported that prohibition, and that meant that we are supporting vaccine requirements, but just that we oppose all employer mandates as a general principle. So just wanted to get that clarification out there. The next bill I wanted to talk about was HB 157, and this is Sovereign Lands Revenue Amendments. This was sponsored by Representative Tim Hawks, who's another great advocate for our industry. And basically what this bill did is just to clarify that the mineral revenues that come off of sovereign lands, and the sovereign lands we have in the state are, essentially the beds of lakes and of navigable waters that we had at statehood. And so those are considered state sovereign lands, and any mineral royalties or other royalties that come off of those lands go directly to the state. It's not as, not like when we have to pay federal royalties when we're dealing with the federal mineral estate. But essentially what HB 57 did was to clarify that any mineral royalties that are produced as a result of mining activities on sovereign lands, especially on places like the Great Salt Lake, will actually go to benefit the conservation and restoration and continued ecological and economic health of those state sovereign lands. And so where you're seeing an increase in, for example, lithium production on the Great Salt Lake, those monies that will come into the state as a result of that will be earmarked to stay with programs that will ultimately ensure the long-term health and benefit of the Great Salt Lake and other bodies of water and state sovereign lands where those minerals are produced. So we thought that was a very helpful clarification that, again, the money that's coming off of those lithium and magnesium and salt and other operations on the Great Salt Lake, those royalties will stay and will benefit the Great Salt Lake in the long term and not be used for other programs within the agencies that manage those lands. Next, I wanted to talk about HB 244. This is geological carbon sequestration amendments. This was sponsored by Representative Steve Handy. And basically what this bill did is to give, the beginnings of a legal framework for the state to regulate carbon sequestration, utilization, CCUS activities here within the state. One of the primary purposes of this, again, was to start to build out a legal framework for the state regulating carbon capture activities, but also so the state could start the process of applying for primacy with the federal government so that the state can actually have primacy to regulate CCUS activities here within the state. So we did a lot of work on this bill to make sure that this wasn't creating any sort of unintended consequences or any mandates for the Board of Oil, Gas and Mining that they would have trouble dealing with. And want to credit the chair, Chris Hansen of the Board of Oil, Gas and Mining, and other members that really helped us to work through some of these issues, and also the University of Utah and some private sector folks that were very involved in going back and forth and debating this bill. But this is not by any means the sort of full legal framework we'll need for future developments on the carbon capture front, but it's a good first step, and again will allow the state to start what will be a multi-year process in getting primacy so that for future activities we'll be dealing with state regulators and not federal regulators. The next bill I wanted to talk about was HB 263. This was Utah Watersheds Council amendments. And so in the 2020 session, Representative Hawks, who I talked about before, actually ran a bill that established a state watershed council. And so the idea was that this would sort of be a watershed council that would incorporate all the work that the local watershed councils do and have a statewide entity that was talking about watershed-wide issues and providing some guidance for policymakers. The Watershed Council, when it was set up, we actually were able to work on that original bill to get an industry seat on that council. And so we do have a seat that's actually nominated. The nominees are sent up to the governor from our association, from manufacturers, and from the Petroleum Association. And then the governor ultimately picks one of those nominees. When this Watershed Council first started meeting at the end of last year, we recognized that one of the sort of holes in representation was that we didn't have an actual water attorney on that Watershed Council, and so that was sort of recognized very quickly that was a hole that needed to be filled to make sure that Watershed Council was functioning properly. And so Representative Chu's bill, HB 263, simply added a water attorney to that Watershed Council, and that passed through with very strong support and passed through very quickly in the House and the Senate. Next, I want to talk about HB 280, and this also is from Representative Steve Handy. And this is called the Cybersecurity Commission, and this state sets up a statewide cybersecurity commission, which will again, delve into issues that we have related to cybersecurity for our infrastructure, for our financial sector, and many other potential concerns there. What we did as the Mining Association is that we asked that the way that the Cybersecurity Commission was constructed was to go back and use the federal government's definition of critical infrastructure sectors. And during the COVID pandemic in particular, we worked very hard as the mining industry, nationwide, to make sure that mining and energy and critical manufacturing, agriculture, all the industries that we really contribute to were included in those critical infrastructure industries. So now the statewide cybersecurity commission will actually reflect those sectors that were established by the Department of Homeland Security. And again, mining is included in multiple sectors there, again, in mining and energy and in critical manufacturing and agriculture. And so this makes sure that we'll also have our industries represented on a statewide level as they start to debate and talk about potential future policy issues related to cybersecurity. Next, I want to talk a little bit about a bill that ultimately didn't pass, but that we did a lot of work on. This is HB 311, Alternate Fuel Heavy Equipment Tax Credit. So this is essentially a bill that would have given a tax credit to heavy equipment that used alternate types of fuel. And the original iteration of this bill was pretty problematic. It had a bunch of definitions in there about different types of fuels and different engines and horsepower and et cetera, that were a little bit problematic for our industry. The final bill was one that we could support, and it's one that could have provided some benefit to our industry. Ultimately, this didn't get through the Senate in the final analysis, but it does provide a good framework if the sponsor wants to bring this back for future consideration. I also wanted to talk about HB 405. This is another bill that didn't pass, but that we did a lot of work on. This was from Representative Schultz, who's the minority leader in the House. And this was called switcher amendments. And essentially what this would have done is to require that freight switchers in the Wasatch Front convert over to cleaner forms of cleaner emission vehicles in the future. So it would have required that they become either diesel electric or or hydrogen fuel cell switchers in the future. This was really a bill that was targeted at the UP and trying to get them to bring in some higher tiered freight switchers for their big yards here on the Wasatch Front. But the way that the original bill was constructed, it actually would have pulled in some of our operations that also use freight switchers, which was not the sponsor's intent. And so we had a substitute bill that was ready to go if this moved through the process. Ultimately, Representative Schultz was able to get an agreement from the UP to bring in some higher tiered freight switchers, and he ultimately let the bill die. But we did have a carve out for our industry operations if the bill was going to progress. And then I also wanted to talk about HB 418. This is a grid resilience committee, and this again is a bill that establishes a statewide committee. In this case, to talk about grid resilience within the state. And on this, we were able to get Representative Albrecht, who is the sponsor of the bill, to include a seat for the fuel production industry. So, I mean, essentially anybody that's working to produce the actual fuels, the coal and the natural gas that go into, to producing most of the electricity that we use here within the state. They now will have a representative on this grid resilience committee as well, in addition to some of the folks from the Division of Public Utility and the Office of Energy Development, the Department of Public Safety and the Division of Emergency Management, et cetera. So we will have somebody that's actually from the fuel sector on that committee. And we thought that this was an important thing. I mean, obviously, if you don't have a healthy fuel industry here, then that creates potential problems for grid resilience in the long term. There were a number of bills that ultimately could have potentially affected the mining industry that didn't make it through the process, either because the sponsor decided to let them go or because we were able to rally support against them. But there were bills that dealt with mining surety that didn't make it through the process. A bill that essentially would have undone the small mine permit program within DOGM that we were able to stop. And then also a couple of bills that dealt with carbon taxes. Well, one bill that was calling specifically for a carbon tax, and another resolution that was calling to study a carbon tax. And we were able to have both of those not make it through the process. So. And now I wanted to turn to Senate bills. There weren't nearly as many Senate bills this year as House bills. But one of the things that we talked about a little bit with Representative Lund was the income tax relief that the legislature passed through. And so that was primarily done with Senate Bill 59, which is a state income tax reduction. And basically what this did is it changed the corporate and individual rate from a 4.95% rate to a 4.85% rate, which may not sound like a lot, but I mean ultimately that provided over $160 million in tax relief for individuals and corporations within the state, and is again a good step in the right direction for reducing the tax burden here in the state. Also, Senate Bill 80. This was from Senator Winterton, real property recording amendments. And this was a bill that was really championed by some of the county recorders, and there were a lot of technical issues within the bills that could have created problems for our industry, and particularly for the landmen that we use in putting together projects and permitting projects. And we were able to work with the sponsor and with the county recorders to get to consensus language that protected both, that accomplished what they were trying to do, and getting some more clarification as to, what they needed in terms of recording documents, but also that would have that will protect our industry and wouldn't create undue burden as we're trying to move forward with our projects. And in particular, I need to give credit to Gage Zobel from Dorsey and Whitney. He was really critical in helping to come in and negotiate on this with the county recorders and get to consensus language that everybody could live with. We talked about this a little bit on the podcast that we did during the session. I want to talk about Senate Bill 95 from Representative Darren Owens. This is limitations on employer liability. And this is essentially a bill that provides some protections for employers who want to employ those that have had felony convictions in their past. So this provides some opportunities for, limitations on liability if an employer wants to employ somebody that has a record, essentially. And as long as they're, being responsible in how these individuals are employed, and are not putting them in situations that maybe they've had issues with in the past, that this provides a level of protection for employers, and frankly opens up another option for potential worker recruitment. And mining was one of the industries that was included in what is a pilot program, along with other heavy industries and retail and some other industries within the state that are really struggling with finding workers. And we think that this again is another great opportunity for our industry, but also an opportunity for us to provide steady employment to those that are that have paid their debt to society and trying to get their lives back on track. I want to mention Senate Bill 111. This is also from Senator Winterton, and this made changes to the Permanent Community Impact Fund Board, and changed the way that the sort of county allocations worked in there, so that now that you're going to have seats for the counties that produce the most mineral lease revenue in different commodity groups. And so the county that produces the most for oil, that for natural gas, and for coal. And made some other changes. One of the things that we fought really hard for was to make sure that in this bill, the governor now appoints the chair of the board. And we worked really hard to make sure that whoever that appointee is actually has to reside in a rural county. And so, this is probably the most rural focused board we have in the state. And we wanted to make sure that whoever's chair of that board actually is residing in a rural county, and is not, somebody from a non-rural county that maybe doesn't understand quite as well the needs of our rural communities. I should also mention from Senator Winterton, he had quite a few bills we were dealing with this session. SB 146, this is Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining Amendments. And this is something that some of the folks on this call actually worked on. But essentially, this makes a fairly small change where if there is oil that's produced from in situ operations in oil sand and oil shale operations, that these would actually, that those operations would be regulated by the oil and gas section of DOGM rather than the mineral section of DOGM. And so, it's a fairly small change. So again, for in situ production for oil sands and oil shale, that those would be regulated again by the oil and gas side and not the mining side. The other, if it is essentially still a mining operation, that would still be overseen by the mineral side from DOGM's group. And then I also wanted to highlight a couple of the resolutions that were out there. Resolutions don't obviously have the force of law, but they do provide a sense for where the legislature is. And there were a couple of good resolutions. One which was highlighting Utah's willingness to cooperate as federal partners in managing public lands. And so this talked a little bit about the state's record in successfully managing public lands. It got into a little bit about how public lands that we already have here in the state that have some level of protection should be counted towards any future goals for land conservation, like the 30 by 2030 goals that are being talked about on a federal level. And that, really the federal actions need to take into account local management and local needs. And then also Senate Concurrent Resolution 3. This was also by Senator David Hinkins. And this was a resolution highlighting Utah's position with regard to critical minerals and rare earths. And so this is a resolution that again goes through and talks a lot about the wonderful mineral estate we have here in the state and the opportunities that we have on the critical mineral and rare earth front. So that's the sort of overview that I wanted to give. Representative Lund did talk about the water bills. There were a lot of different water bills that went through this session. It was a major major emphasis. We talked a little bit about the bill related to the state sovereign lands revenues and how those will go back to the Great Salt Lake. There was a bill that established a fairly large amount of money to go towards conservation efforts on the Great Salt Lake, about $40 million. There were bills again that with the watershed councils and making some adjustments there, and so there is a major emphasis on that, and I think that increasingly legislators are recognizing the great role that industry can play in helping to preserve these assets that we all rely on. So I will stop there, and again would love to open it up for any questions that you have, and then want to get you out of here and to lunch on time. So any questions from the group about anything that I talked about or anything that I didn't talk about that you wanted to discuss? Anyone? All right. Well, again, I appreciate all of your support. This is obviously a really critical thing that the Utah Mining Association does in representing the industry during the legislative session. I think overall we had a very, very good session. There were most of the bills that we were supporting ended up getting passed, and a lot of the ones that we opposed didn't get passed. Again, we had some major wins, especially I think with our tax credit bill and some of the other issues that we were able to work on. And I will tell you, I mean, in many cases, we will have a large bill that we're supporting or trying to push through the process. And then there's also a lot of, very small stuff where it's just, fixing a line here and there in a bill that could, create unintended consequences for our industry, monitoring a lot of bills to make sure that they, don't end up getting into areas that could create problems for us, making sure that we really have eyes on everything that's happening in the session. And so I appreciate all of your support that allows the Mining Association to do this. And we will have the final version of the bill trackers available in your member accounts. And then we're also going to be sending out an overview that talks through some of these bills and others that we were working on during the session. And please always feel free to reach out to me if you've got any questions at all or concerns about anything that happened during the session or anything that you'd like to have us focus on as we're ramping up for the next session. So I mean, really the interim meetings start almost immediately. We'll have an interim meeting in April, and that's really where the legislature starts planning for future bill filings and other things that and we have the opportunity to get some of our issues in front of legislators and make progress. So if there's anything you'd like us to focus on or things that you think we need to be aware of that are happening with your operations or in your neck of the woods, like please reach out to me and let me know that. It's really important for me to be able to get feedback from all of our members as we're dealing with these policy issues. So thank you again for coming today. I want to give major thanks to our legislative committee. We have a wonderful legislative committee. Des Barker is the chair of our legislative committee on the mining side and worked closely again with David Bird, who's the chair on the manufacturer side, and we've got the Petroleum Association that participates in that, other industry associations, and then I also need to give a shout out to the staff here at the Mining Association, Liz and Bren. They do a wonderful job in keeping everything going where I'm pretty much completely absent for 45 days because I'm at the Capitol and dealing with all of these wonderful 1,200 bill files that were open. So appreciate their efforts. And again, thank you for your support and for allowing us to represent you and for all the amazing work you do for the state of Utah. So thank you. And we'll, please look for our recap document in our next newsletter. Thanks.